From viral storytelling to real-world sales, Alexis Bittar's Bittarverse social content series has redefined how brands blend entertainment with performance marketing. To discuss how a disruptive creative vision, data-driven strategy, and digital innovation are driving measurable growth, please welcome Brooke Shepard, CEO and co-founder of Mason Interactive, and Jessica Steele, Vice President of Retail Sales and Marketing at Alexis Bittar. All right, I've already mentioned it, Jessica. I want to get right into talking about the Bittarverse. So the Bittarverse, well, actually, when you answer the question, if anybody has not seen it, just maybe give a brief description as to what it is. So the Bittarverse social content series has been a creative and commercial success. How did Alexis Bittar's disruptive approach to brand storytelling evolve? And how do you ensure that it translates into tangible business impact rather than just buzz?
Sure. So a very quick recap. We're a jewelry and handbag brand, and the Bittarverse is essentially a kind of fashion telenovela that we've created for social media. So they're fictional characters. We dress them in our product, and they have wild storylines that exist in this Bittarverse. And I think, how did we kind of come to this space is that Alexis has had a really long history of non-traditional marketing, but he had been away from the brand and for about 5+ years and came back to the helm. And in that time, the social media landscape had just evolved so much. And so when he returned, I think it very quickly became clear that he was not interested in putting out more of kind of the same that we were seeing from other brands, and that he was really interested in taking this more narrative approach to showcasing the product in a way that kind of was brought to life by these fictional characters, by these people who he saw as the wearers of his product. And so we started very like guerrilla style, just shooting out on the street, one videographer, 3 of us and Alexis. And those first videos really went viral and kind of took off in a way that we frankly didn't expect. And from there, it became my challenge and that of my team and our partners at Mason to do exactly that. How do we take this brand buzz that was so exciting and turn that into real, traffic conversion? And that's what we've spent the past year doing, is taking that strategy of this very, kind of social content that really felt disruptive in the space. How do we actually tether that back to, earned, owned, and paid channels? And so that's been the exciting and the challenging part of it all.
All right, maybe get into the challenge in a little bit. But Brooke, so you've spoken about the importance of a 360-degree marketing approach. How do you guide brands like Alexis Bittar in balancing performance marketing with brand storytelling that drives sustainable growth?
Can you hear me? If you're focused just on ROAS in your business, which is what a lot of people have been focused on the last 2 years, you're going to ROAS yourself right out of business, right? Because the way that works is, if you're looking at maximum ROAS, you're going to be going after existing customers and past website visitors. That's just the mechanics of how that works. And people are only going to buy from you a finite number of times. It might be 10 times, it might be once, it might be 100 times, but there's some average number of times people are going to buy from you. And if you're focused on extracting maximally efficient revenue and ROAS from those existing customers, you're not getting new customers, and you're going to go out of business. You're going to go into a death spiral. So a better way to look at it is to say that if I have a basket of metrics, ROAS is certainly one of them, and it may be the most important one, but also we need to be looking at new client growth, client churn. We need to be doing a linear regression analysis of what's going to happen if you don't get enough new customers. And the way we guide people on it is actually pretty simple. It's useful to think of it in terms of de-averaging your metrics. So if, let's say your brand wants to be at a 5 ROAS, I'm making that up. It's useful to say, if that's your target, well, the performance marketing retention piece of it, maybe that should be at an 8. But the brand building stuff should maybe be at a 2, below the 5, right? And a lot of unsophisticated marketers would look at that and say, well, that brand building isn't at 5, cut it, right? But it's really useful to de-average those 2 metrics and look at things in a different light to get to a blended ROAS for you want to be. So that's how we try to guide people there.
Jessica, organic landing pages and SEO-driven content have doubled revenue. Tell us how you optimize that digital content to turn brand engagement into actual conversions.
So I think, historically we've worked with, Mason SEO team in advance, right? We've had the kind of gift of time to prepare for a seasonal launch or, you know, a new trend that was coming and kind of build SEO foundation first. But this kind of train was already taking off. And so very quickly we were seeing searches that related back to this social media content, and we were kind of chasing it and needed to understand, okay, how do we, you know, capture some of that interest that we're seeing, you know, whether it was branded searches or not. And so the first thing we really did was build a dedicated landing page on the site to connect back to, you know, SEO content that kind of could ground it, to make the videos shoppable on site, to feature the, you know, the pieces that were in the videos. And once we had that kind of foundation built on the site, then we could really go back to more top of funnel approaches and kind of keep spreading the word about this. So, you know, whether that was in a New York Times feature, or we had, you know, the Real Housewives of New York come onto the videos and do a cameo, and then in return on the Real Housewives, they came into one of our stores. So we're always kind of mixing these universes, but we needed a place on site that could actually translate the buzz and that awareness again, you know, in a higher level space back to conversion on site.
Great. I want to come back to that, the Real Housewives thing in a little bit, but first I want to throw it to Brooke, and this is kind of like the second part of what you started to address before with ROAS. Digital campaigns are often seen as brand building rather than direct revenue drivers. So, but yet, as we've already seen, Bittarverse content has shown immediate sales impact. So what lessons can other brands learn from Alexis Bittar's unique approach?
Thanks. It's an immediate impact. This is not just brand building. It translates into next day sales. My media team that runs this account could speak about this with more fluency than I could, but here's some things we've done to translate this into real sales. The Real Housewives is a great example. She's on the show, or in the Bittarverse, and so what we do is we very tactically layer in an audience of reality TV aficionados into our meta ads. That seems simple, but it took some doing and some intelligence. Those ads, that audience rather, in meta, converts at 3 times better a rate, and it's more efficient. It drives more sales, and it converts 3 times better than the average audience in meta. So that's a tactical example of she's in the Bittarverse. What are we going to do? There's 3 things here. That's the first. The second thing is, because they're creating so much content, and because we can slice it and dice it for different formats and different aspect ratios, the media team has the freedom to chase the lowest CPM for the client, right? So we're not just beholden to Google and Meta, which is what most people are doing. Frankly, I'm sure it's 80% of most people's budgets, if not more. But we're allowed to, with these other formats and pieces of creative that we have, to say, well, our CPMs are lower in TikTok today. Let's go there. Or hey, you know what? We could turn this into a digital out of home, and we could target. You have a store in Carroll Gardens near where I live. We could take that content and put it on TV screens around that home, right? So because they're producing this content, the second thing is we can chase CPMs, be more creative about how we're doing it. And the third thing is, and this to me is really key, and we'll use some real numbers here. This is really creating actual measurable impact in the business. So Jules and Margot are, would you say that they're the top characters? All right. So we created a Jules and Margot audience in TikTok.
Could you explain who they are if people don't know?
I think, yeah, please.
Yes. So Margot is our
emotional
terrorist. Yeah, she's you know, kind of this catch-all, you know, example of this.
She knows how to rock a turban.
This Upper East Side, you know, very wealthy, kind of, you know, just dripping in jewelry at all times. And Jules is her kind of ever-loving personal assistant who, you know, is
long-suffering,
beleaguered, but yes, long-suffering,
abused,
and you know, kind of can't live with each other, can't live without each other. And so we've got kind of, we're also hitting very kind of strategically 2 different audiences with those 2 characters. Jules is very much like a downtown it girl, but then kind of works for this Upper East Side woman. And we've got both, right? We have a Madison Avenue store and a Soho store. So and it's not a coincidence that that's kind of how we cast them.
Right. Thank you for explaining that. So the Jules and Margot audience has 3 million impressions in market in TikTok in the last year, and it has something like 10 million impressions in Meta in the last year. We're, of course, excluding past website visitors and customers from those lists. So that's 10 million impressions served in a thing that did not exist without the creativity of Alexis Bittar himself and Jess and the team pulling these things together. That's measurable, right? That's 13 million people that saw the brand and hadn't seen it before as a result of this creative. So yeah, those are three ways.
Excellent. All right. So Jessica, you've leveraged the Bittarverse across multiple touch points, as we said, social, digital, and even in-person events, as you said before. So how have these in-person activations, like the Soho meet and greet, enhanced customer engagement, and what are the challenges in translating that digital success to physical retail?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in person, in some ways, to me, always feels like this ultimate barometer of success because, for our audience, a click or a like is low lift. It's, somewhat, not that it's always easy to get in front of their eyes, but it's a lower lift, action. But when it begins to translate into foot traffic, for me, it feels like a much more meaningful potential customer lifetime value when you're looking at that. And almost right away, again, once these videos had really taken off, we were seeing people come into our brick and mortar locations and say, I found you guys on TikTok, or, oh my God, I love Margot. Is she real? Which is always hilarious to me.
Is she real?
She's real in our hearts. And so we kind of doubled down on that. If we were hearing that in store, we gave shelf space to Margot's top picks. We put iPads on all of the sales floors that play the social video content on a loop. We had their images as decals in the window for, like a month. And then last fall, I think the biggest success here was having an in-person meet and greet with Margot and Jules, the actresses that played.
Did any of you go to that on Prince Street? No, there were lines around the block, so it's not a crazy question.
Yeah, it was really exciting. It was the first time that we were seeing this very much social first tactic translate so meaningfully into in-person, and not just in incremental revenue, that evening, but just a confirmation that it can work in this way, that, you can kind of connect this omni-channel world and start in social and have that kind of back end into in-person.
With lines around the corner, it sounds like you should start your own Bittar Con or something.
We have...
You mentioned the housewives.
We're selling T-shirts, too. That was another fun thing we added, but yeah, it's...
One of the things that we were talking about backstage before we came out here was the appeal of brands across the country. I mean, it's a very diverse country and multiple cultures. So I was wondering how, like you said, this, especially Margot and Jules' characters in the Bittarverse, they resonate very deeply here in New York City. You said Jules is the it girl from downtown and Margot is the doyenne of the Upper East Side. But how do, and in my intro, I measured measurable performance here. How is that, you mentioned retail, how does that content resonate across the country, vis-a-vis what we've mentioned backstage, talking about different cultures and the appeal of brands? How does this type of content, and have you been able to measure its appeal in maybe places around the country that you may not think that it would have that type of appeal?
I mean, I think the great thing here is that, again, Alexis is born and bred in New York, and that's very much in the DNA of the brand. And I think, it's the same way that shows like Sex and the City or whatever, have a universal appeal because you do kind of want to buy into this world of New York. And so we're showing our version of New York. I think it resonates the most deeply here, but at that event, we had someone who said they flew in from Miami to come and meet the characters, which is insane to me. But we have a store in San Francisco, and we see it there too, where they kind of are interested in this glimpse into a world, whether they've been to New York or not. It kind of opens up this alternate reality in the Bittarverse where they can see a peek of that. That being said, we've also partnered pretty strategically with our team at Mason because, like you said, it's a super diverse country. Not all of this content probably appeals to everyone, so we're strategic with what demographics we're serving some of this content to, where we think that it will resonate, in largely urban areas.
And Brooke, how does that affect the media plan? Like, how have you mapped that out?
One of our standard processes as the company is to take, on a monthly basis, a scrub of someone's sales and conversion rates by zip code and by state or whatever demographic we want to look at. So it's our job then to come back to Alexis Bittar and Jess and say, and I'm making these numbers up, no, I'm not giving her numbers away, but to say something like, hey, our conversion rate in New York is here. LA is the second biggest city in the country, and its conversion rate is here. Again, I'm making these numbers up. But if we were to increase the conversion rate in the second largest DMA in the country to the rate it is in New York, that would be transformational to your business. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about a strategy for that. And we can activate things, to Jess's point, like different ads in different places are going to resonate differently. But it is a largely urban brand, which is also a function of that's demographically where the people are. So there's just more people live in cities than don't. So that's where it resonates the best.
Right. So if you're not in that type of community in different parts of the country, it's more like an aspirational urban brand, if that's what you aspire to in your fashion choices. Got it. Great. And we just have a few minutes left, and I'd love you both to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this, maybe the whole, like a more global outlook as to what we've been talking about during this conversation. So Alexis Bittar treats Instagram and almost like a TV network, and with the Bittarverse acting as kind of like an ongoing TV series. So are we seeing the rise of brands, and specifically for today, D2C type brands, functioning as entertainment platforms? And what's next for this approach? And how can other brands replicate this level of immersive content marketing? Why don't you take it first, Jessica?
I think no matter what, when we're producing content, I'm always trying to come at it from an angle of what value are we providing the audience. So, whether that's an educational video of Alexis talking about his design process or an entertainment value add through the Bittarverse. And I think, whether or not you're taking a traditional or something like ours that is more non-traditional approach, how are you providing your audience something that they can't find anything else? And also, how are you using that content to really strategically place yourself at kind of the center of where you want to be? So for us, that's art and fashion, and it may be, we shoot at the Guggenheim so that we can reinforce that, or we have celebrity stylist Law Roach in one of the videos, the Real Housewives, because we know that the reality TV interest audience is working for us. So really kind of pinpointing these things and using them both to give a value add to the customer and to be authentic to you as a brand, right? This approach would not make sense for many other brands. It's a kind of camp madcap world that we've created. But we're seeing this really parasocial relationship with our audience that's, they're guessing the next storyline. They're making suggestions for cameos. They're so invested. And I think that should be the driving force. Where can you find that level of engagement in your own authentic content? And it's that engagement that, has translated to the traffic and the conversion from that. So I think go in search of that for whatever lens you're going to look at it through.
Brooke?
Yeah, so really great creative can compress the buying cycle. If it does its job, you're wondering why you shouldn't buy that piece of jewelry instead of why you should buy it and if you can afford it, right? And this is great creative that is helping to compress that buying cycle. Can other people do this? I think there's two things to that. One of them is the point Jess brought up, but the first is let's look at some logic. And the second thing is let's talk about how it fits into your brand. So logically, you can buy jewelry on your phone when you're watching TV. You can do it. I've done it. You're not going to buy it like a cold plunge pool on Instagram, right? Or some hefty purchase like that. So it has to fit logically with where you have this content out there. And the second thing is, to Jess's point, it has to be very true to the brand. Alexis Bittar is involved in the company. He bought it back. He's heavily involved in it. And it's his unique personality that drives this. We have, just as an example, 2 clients around the corner from your Soho store. Dagny Dover, we've worked with for something like 7 years, and they would not do an event like that. To be true to their own ethos, they'd be focusing more on the community that built their brand. And that resonates with their brand in a way that the Bittarverse wouldn't. Italy is a client of ours. They have a store 2 blocks away from Alexis Bittar's store in Soho. Italy would never do any of this, right? Italy is owned by a private equity firm in Europe, and the way they're looking at this is they're doing partnerships with cruise ships to say that when you're on the cruise ship, here's the best place to get the food. So it has to be logical.
No board would ever approve the content we're creating.
Right, no board would ever approve it, right. So it's right, in a gleeful, wonderful, creative way. So it has to be logical, it has to fit with where you're selling it, and it has to be true to the ethos of the brand. And it works because they're not selling, right? They're creating a universe that you want to be part of. To your point about the parasocial, you're invested and you're trying to figure out what's going to come next. You're not ending each clip with and buy it now at the store. It really is an immersive worldview.
So it's not this type of approach building some type of entertainment series is not for every brand, but if it does fit organically with your brand and your brand's audience responds to it, then take it and run with it. Excellent. Well, Brooke Shepard and Jessica Steele, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks.